I'd like to call to order the Livingston Parish Ordinance Committee meeting for Thursday, July 25th. Ms. Sandy, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Mack, Mr. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Wascom.
Here.
Mr. Talbot.
Here. I think Mr. Mack's just running a couple minutes late. He'll be here shortly. Item 3, review, discuss, recommendation, ordinance, old business, sewer treatment plants. Gary Fogg Talbot. Eddie, you want to come on up and talk about the little, Eddie sent y'all a Livingston Parish draft sewer ordinance progress report, where we've been, talk about questions he's had, so we can start moving maybe in an orderly fashion, and maybe someday we'll start looking at the ordinance line by line and making sure that we're all either happy with, or if we have something we don't like, we can address it. But let's talk about 30 minutes, and if somebody else wants to comment, then we can comment, and then we can.
Do you want me to go through this little progress report, Mr.
Yeah,
Gary?
go through and let them know
Okay.
what you've done and what the questions you've had and where we at right now, and let's move through that.
I'll just kind of read it line by line, I guess, and y'all stop me and we can talk about any one of those items if you want to. Since the introduction of the ordinance to the ordinance committee, we have received calls from at least 5 different individuals. They've had various questions, concerns, and recommendations. The biggest concerns seem to be fines, additional costs to utility operators, holding operators and owners both liable, and whether this is an attempt to eliminate private sewer utility operators in the parish. As discussed last time, we have made public records requests to LDQ for a list of all sewer discharge permits in the parish. Once we get it, this information will give us a better idea of how many permitted systems there are and how many systems the parish is going to have to inspect. It will also get us closer to being able to estimate the cost of administering this ordinance. We would then be able to better estimate what the necessary fees would be. Initially, we assumed that administration of this ordinance would require 2 or more additional parish employees, and possibly the creation of an entire department. Recently, someone made the suggestion that this could possibly be incorporated into our current combined state parish Department of Health. That office certainly has the experience to administer such a program and could potentially do it more effectively. So we definitely feel that that would be something worth exploring, because it could significantly reduce the cost to administer the ordinance.
By doing it in.
You know, across from Sam's office, the little Department of Health where you go get your permit?
Environmental, where you gotta go over there and pay that money anyway.
I always thought that was 100% state. I did not realize that was actually a mixture of state and parish employees. But even some of the inspectors are actually parish employees. So that is something that we certainly could look to as an existing part of parish government that could administer it, which would significantly reduce the cost, more than likely. I also have just a current task list to let you know what we're working on, and some things that we need to work on to get this ordinance to something that you guys may feel comfortable recommending to the rest of the council. Secure and review the list of discharge permits, and we've made that request to DQ. Estimate the number of sewer customers for private sewer utility operators in the parish. Estimate the number of private commercial sewer plants. Begin working on a fee schedule. Work on an implementation plan. Develop an inspection fee schedule. Clarify, separate, and establish a fee schedule for treatment systems that fall outside the definition of a private sewer utility. One question that was brought up last time is you have some trailer parks, for instance, that have their own community system that is owned and operated by the park owner in a lot of cases. But if they're not charging sewer user fees to their residents and they're not registered with the Public Service Commission, they are not a private for-profit sewer utility. So in my opinion, that's something that would not even fall under the franchise fee, because franchise fees are for private for-profit entities that choose to operate in the parish. or would like to operate in the parish. So that's some clarifications that we would need to make and make sure that that was clear in the ordinance as to who would potentially pay franchise
So those would need
fees.
to be making monthly samples or
Well,
quarterly
those,
samples.
those guys would not pay any kind of franchise fee. I'm not saying that they wouldn't pay $100 a year inspection fee or something. We would have to see what was appropriate.
Would they be currently taking samples and sending it to DEQ?
They, all of those, every permitted facility in the parish is supposed to take samples and fill out discharge monitoring reports. And the frequency depends on what type of permit they have. So every facility does that. Of course, there are facilities that are not permitted too, that aren't doing that. And that's something that this ordinance could potentially help us identify those too. So the next part, I kind of have a few questions here that, that some of them I've tried to answer, and other ones I think we need to get some legal opinions on, how to answer them. One of the questions is, that I've had more than one time, is it legal for the parish to enforce a state or federal regulation? I don't know, I'm not an attorney. So I definitely recommend that the parish seek some legal counsel as to whether or not there's any issues with that.
But now, Eddie, it is legal for the parish to enforce a parish ordinance or parish regulation. And if we adopt an ordinance that requires that the sewer treatment plant meet a particular standard, whether it be a state standard or federal standard, as long as our ordinance requires it, then it would be legal for the parish to enforce that ordinance.
It seems to me that that would be the case too, but like I said, I'm trying not to play attorney, so don't ask me to answer that question.
Well, can I ask something real quick on that?
Yes, sir.
So we're gonna take some action to try to figure that out, because, I mean,
I've
I
got
don't
it.
really know the answer to that either, but I have read some regulations, you know. To me, the state would need to give permission in a statute for us to be able to regulate that type of stuff. And maybe it is, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but to me, I would think that if a local government authority has the power to, and authority to oversee that operation, that the state statute would need to state so. But we do need to probably take some type of action to try to remedy that so that we can.
I don't disagree with you, but given the fact that St. Tammany, Ascension, EBR, those are the three I know of. I'm sure there are probably others that have a similar type ordinance that regulate this thing. I have a feeling that if you pass the ordinance locally, that you create the power to do it yourself. Because you're not enforcing state law, you're enforcing parish law or local law.
That parallels the state law.
And I would agree with that, but I mean,
And then
we need to look at it a little bit more.
There's a
But I
couple,
think that-
there's a
I
couple
think
of them
that-
in here that I would recommend you guys actually get Mr. Chris or somebody else to look at.
And, you know, I mean, I guess the point is,
I think where you need to try to figure out, is what exactly specifically we have the authority to enforce, because to me, some of those, local government entities that are currently doing that are strictly, following the state requirements right now and kind of enforcing the same requirements as the state is. They're not coming up with their own individual, specific, and separate laws and requirements to oversee that operation. So I really think that's an extremely important action that we need to try to get clarified.
Sandy,
Sir.
can you email this ordinance to Chris during the week and just ask him, tell him that it's preliminary and that we're going through it? But could he identify any problem areas that he thinks might exist in the ordinance as it stands now? That way we don't talk about issues that he think and then ask him later for his opinion. Let's get an idea early if he's got a problem with something, and then we can address it when we get to it. And if he has a problem, maybe he could make a recommendation on how we work through that particular thing.
And there's another thing too, I just want to apologize again for when y'all first started this. I missed a few meetings, you know, working late and stuff, but I plan on being here in the future on time, you know, as much as possible. But before we get into the extreme nuts and bolts of this, I mean, I just kind of want to talk a little bit as a group and as a community. What is truly the intent and purpose of this ordinance, you know? And what I mean by that specifically is, let's go ahead and ask that question. Well, let's just talk about it, you know, without looking at this first. So, say for instance, you have a community sewer system. We're calling it community/private, you know, maybe a subdivision, and you have the sewer district, you know, that's sewer lines and stuff like that, that it's a far distance, okay? And there's no possible way that they're gonna be able to tie in quickly, you know, that type of thing. What is our intent, what is our intent and purpose to regulate that? You know, how are we going to make it better in a simple term? I mean, just explain a little bit of that to me. You know, I missed a few meetings in the beginning. I just kind of would like to know
You want to handle that?
what can we do better that the state ain't already doing? You know, I mean, you know, you take samples, you test them. If they out of compliance, you know, you got so many days to currently, you know, let them resample and get in compliance and this type of thing. How are we gonna do that? And then the second question is if a local government entity like us, and y'all may have the answers to this, you know, I don't know that much about how St. Tammany and that group is handling this, but how do we go back and enforce that I don't know, subdivision or that developer or that sewer operator or development owner, sewer system owner to abide by our regulations? What is our plan to be able to do that, you know? And you may have it already answered, but what is the intent? I mean, I know that we're still working on this, and we may have to change a lot of things, you know, down the road, but I think that it starts with some true intent and purpose on how do we, I don't know, improve the overall quality of life for our people and improve the environment, you know, because I don't think that anybody in Livingston Parish thinks that it's a good idea to dump raw sewer into our environment. You know, I don't think that's a good thing at all in any way, shape, or form, but how specifically are we gonna try to do a better job than what the state is and not conflict what they're currently doing versus what we're doing and that type of stuff? You know, before we get too deep into this, can we just talk about that a little bit?
I can.
Sure, I think he identified that clarification. Go ahead, Eddie.
Let's say you have an existing subdivision.
Yep.
That has an existing community system that's that's owned and operated by a private sewer utility company X.
Yeah.
That belongs to Mr. Bogle.
Yeah.
And he's been collecting sewer user fees for 20 years. And unfortunately, he's not putting any money back into the operation and maintenance of the plant.
Yep.
So you get a call from your constituent tomorrow, I got raw sewer all over in my backyard. You go out there that day, and you say, yep, there's not even any electricity to this treatment plant. And there are ones like that in the parish, Shane. That's the sad part about all of this. There's community sewer systems here that are that bad in Livingston Parish, and our residents are having to put up with that.
Right.
They got raw sewage in their community.
Okay.
This ordinance, the goal of this ordinance is to try to keep that from happening. It is not to run private sewer utility operators out the parish.
Okay, that's
This ordinance will benefit the private sewer utility operators that are doing a good job, because there are ones in the parish that are doing a good job.
That's a good
And they're
point.
trying to put money back into their systems.
That's a very good point. But let me just say this, and we can kind of talk through this. You know, I'm not opposed to you know, trying to make sure that our environment is better off. You know, but in today's world, if somebody was to call me and report that. I mean, I would call the Department of Health and Hospitals up there, Mr. Keenan's office, and they would go out and they would inspect it, and if it was out of compliance, they would figure out a game plan. They have done it before to get the sewer system in compliance through state and government regulations that already currently exist, so that we don't have to come back and over-regulate. I mean,
Shane, I've been in this business for 30 years, and there's plants operate like I'm telling you that DEQ has known about for 20 years, and they still operated just like that. So it is not working.
That plant.
It's not working.
That plant that you call Keenan about is not under his purview.
Yeah, Keenan is limited to what size? 1,500 gallons per day or something like that? Or what? 100,000 gallon per day plant. I know, but like the local sanitarian, that's typically up to 3,000.
well, that's another thing too. I mean, I think we need to get some trained, qualified professionals in here to try to help us understand and answer some of these questions, because I would like to know, instead of kind of speculating, you know, the true fact. Does Keenan have that authority to go out there and enforce state regulations to fix some of that stuff, you know?
I'm gonna tell you, I asked Keenan for a number of permitted, I said, how many sewer treatment plants do we have permitted in Livingston Parish? He got, and I'm not talking about modads, I'm talking about commercial package units, either at a restaurant or at a subdivision. He got no idea. Cause it's not, I mean, those subdivision plants are not the purview of the health unit here. Those things are controlled by DHH, cause we talked about the tie-in of a business to the parish line. And those plans have to go to DHH, not to the local unit. Now, the unit might identify the business with a deficiency and are working towards solving that particular problem. But the administration of the bigger plant or tying into the community system is the purview of the Department of Health and Hospitals. Am I
Well,
right?
the discharge permits are regulated by
The discharge permits are
LADEQ.
regulated by DEQ.
Yeah, so if you have a typical community plant that hadn't met their sewer discharge permit limits in 7 years, typically that's something that DEQ is supposed to be issuing a notice of non-compliance and issuing a compliance order, but it's not working, Shane. It's sad that I can tell you it's not
Well,
working.
okay, and that's a good point, you know, and I believe you and everything, but do we have documented evidence that we've contacted the DEQ and that they didn't come out and actually abide by their rule and make sure that rules were followed? I mean,
I think Eddie's asked, one of the things that I think they've asked for is the number of discharge permits and then the number of plants that are out of compliance. And
Yeah,
we'll
we've
find out.
made
Well, let me ask you this, and
we've made a public records request to DEQ to get that whole list of how many permits are in the parish.
you see, I was under the impression, and y'all know more about this than me, but I was under the impression that was public record, that you could go online, and I forgot the website and everything, but you could look up every single, private and public, utility,
You can, but
operator and license, and you can actually look up how many times
the
they filled
EDMS
their
website.
sample, and you can look up if they're in compliance and the compliance.
but you have to
plan
have you have to have an agency interest number to easily find it. Otherwise, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Say that again?
You got to have an AI number so that you can find that data associated with every
So-
permit.
What's an AI number?
My truck's
An
okay.
agency interest number.
So like my truck stop,
Yeah.
got underground storage tanks, registered with DEQ.
Mm-hmm.
My truck stop has an AI number.
Mhm.
So basically, if you know my AI number, you can then log on to DEQ, punch in my AI number, and find the history from day one, when that number was created, everything related to underground storage tanks or whatever. you've
But
gotta have-
there's no functionality in that website to where you can say all sanitary sewer discharge permits in Livingston Parish. It doesn't work that way.
So you gotta have AI number, and
If-
the issues
That's why I
are-
had to make the request to
The,
DEQ.
the issues are, for example,
Do you have to be like an operator or something? Because
An operator to get the
can we
information.
take that action? Because, I mean, I was told by somebody that was in this line of business that is public record, that anybody can go look that up, and that you can find out that information. So, I mean.
You
I'm
can,
hearing
Shane,
conflicting
but
stories.
you cannot go to the website and ask it for the list of all the treatment plants in Livingston Parish.
No, you
There's
can.
no way
the
to do that.
The permitted, systems, you know, the permitted systems, you can't.
If you
you're
have a
telling me you can't?
name
If you have
or
an
an
AI
AI
name
number
or
or
AI
something
number.
like
No,
that, you
just
can
go
look
and
it
you
up.
can punch in Livingston Parish, and it'll give you every
doesn't.
single one of them.
No, it doesn't.
Really?
No.
Okay, well, we need to find out, you know, because.
I've got the information coming. I already made the request, so it may be here this week, next week.
Well, maybe I was looking at something different when I looked at that. Maybe I need to go back and.
Yeah, if
check
you've
that
got
out.
if you've got a permit number or something like that, you can pull up all the information
No, you
about that.
can find it all out
particular-
already. The permit number's there. All you gotta know is the area that it's in. I mean, I looked at it myself. I mean, it's got everything in Albany that's permitted, you know?
Huh.
It had Gary's, it had everybody, everything, unless I'm mistaken. But yeah, it had Frog's Truck Stop and everything on there.
I need to get you to come by the office and show me how to
I
sort
will.
that.
You need to
'cause
I will.
I've been looking at that website
I'm
for
gonna
many
tell you, I've
years
had-
and I hadn't been able to make it sort like that.
I'll
so.
give you an example. So if I have a.
It was easy.
I'm gonna tell you, if I have a customer that called, say I got a new customer, somebody that contacts me and wants me to sell them fuel. I've gotta make sure that the tanks that I'm dumping that fuel in are properly registered with the Department of Environmental Quality.
Yes, sir.
Well, I gotta tell them, what's your AI number? Without that AI number, I've tried, it's impossible to find that information.
Maybe I'm
But that's a
confused.
non-issue, Shane. I've got the info coming,
got
so
it
we'll,
coming.
we'll,
And
we'll
we
know
made
how
the-
many
and we made
permitted
the request
facilities are in the
already.
parish, so.
And they told you that you couldn't look that up online already, that it wasn't public record?
Well, we actually tried to do it ourselves, and I think the quote from Keenan was, it wasn't a good system. You can't look at everything.
That ain't my opinion.
Well, I'm
serious.
Me and you gonna have to go eat lunch so you can show me how to do that.
But anyway, getting back to some of the things I was asking and talking about,
I spoke to Mr. Glover, and he told me that you had to have an AI number, and that it was not a good system.
and I believe you, I'm
And
just
he
saying
tried to
that,
walk me through it, it was confusing, so.
okay. Well, but going back to, okay, so how, just verbally, without looking at all this, so say you, for instance, you had a subdivision and you had the operator and the owner of the sewer system and they were permitted and they were out of compliance, okay? What is our intent and purpose to try to go figure out how to get them in compliance? We're gonna like come up with a system and we're gonna like sample, and if the sample's out of whack, or we're gonna take the sample that's already being pulled and we're gonna kinda look at the results, and if it's out of compliance, we're gonna come back and we're gonna have a more advanced law to where we take more advanced action to get them back in compliance, maybe separate and different from the state compliance, and how is that gonna work?
This is what I envision happening, Shane.
Okay.
So you have a community system that's being operated that is not just out of compliance every once in a while, but chronically out of compliance.
Mhm.
If you miss a couple limits on your permit a few times a year, everybody does that. If you're in compliance 100% of the time, your permit limits are not stringent enough. I mean, so just being out of compliance every once in a while is a non-issue. But you've got somebody that for a 6-month period has not met any of his permit limits. Something's wrong. So what I would envision is the parish contacting that owner operator, say, hey, I need to come make an inspection. What's going on? He goes out there, he sees the electricity's off because they quit paying their power bill. there's no chlorine in the chlorinator, and maybe a few other simple fixes. And probably somebody in the subdivision has already complained to DQ, and they've already sent a compliance order. But understand, DQ is a very small entity, and they've got the whole state of Louisiana. So it's very difficult for them to try to police
Well,
the entire
let's
state.
Go back to what you were
So,
gonna
so let
say.
me keep going on this tangent, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So the parish, maybe the owner wasn't even aware of it, the operator done skipped town. He makes contact with the owner and says, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I see what you're talking about. I'll get this corrected next week. And he gets it corrected, and, you know, he puts chlorine in the chlorinator, he gets the power turned back on, gets the blowers running, cleans out the clarifier, and in 30, 45 days, man, he's making some pretty decent water. That's what we want to happen.
Okay.
And he never got a fine or anything like that.
That sounds pretty good.
But
Let me ask
that's
you-
what I envision.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. What if he says the owner of the system don't have the money to pay me and I'm not coming back out there to fix it? Then what?
Well, so you got two people responsible. You got an owner and an operator.
Yes, sir.
Two people that are potentially responsible.
Yes, sir.
If the owner's not paying the operator, you can't expect him to do something he ain't getting paid for.
Right.
So now it's the owner's of the treatment plant's responsibility.
Yeah.
So the parish has more authority, in my opinion, than anybody to make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say that DSLD is still building houses in that subdivision. One call to the permit office, there's not gonna be any more building permits issued in subdivision X. You think that's gonna get the
Well, I
sewer
could see
treatment plant
that.
operators?
I could see that, but most of these
State can't do that, Parish of Livingston can do that.
And I kind of agree with that, but most of your, to me, problem sewer systems are not gonna be in the newly developed subdivisions.
100%
They're gonna be
correct.
probably in the older ones, so.
You're right.
What if all the lots are sold and the house is already there? What would
Then,
be
then,
the
then you,
intent
then you
purpose?
don't,
How
then
would
you don't have that option.
Okay, so how are
But-
you gonna make it get
So
in
let,
compliance?
so what, one thing this ordinance does is it doesn't just give you the authority to go find somebody. It also gives you the authority, if the parish has the funds to do it, that you could go fix it and back charge the developer and lien and take any legal measures to do so. So now you have parish government that could step in if they wanted to and spend $10,000-15,000 to get things fixed, get the power turned back on, and get the plant operating to protect the people that live in that subdivision and the people downstream. You have that authority too, if you would pass this ordinance. So you can do more than just send letters.
So I'm
You
just
can
trying to
actually
talk
get
about the
the,
intent and
get the,
purpose, so say for instance, I'm just trying to fully understand this because this is extremely important, okay? So, if you had this subdivision full of houses already developed, sewer systems out of compliance, and owner operator refuses to get it in compliance, or maybe doesn't have the funding or whatsoever, in order to get it in compliance, what you're proposing would be for the Livingston Parish government to go and fund to fix this, and get it in compliance. That's what you're saying?
I'm saying in certain instances, Shane,
Uh-huh.
where if we had, some of these user fees and franchise fees we're talking about, that could be put into a fund,
And
to
would
where you would
Livingston
have some.
Parish- Would Livingston Parish, or would it be the local sewer district, or what would be the intent to actually, once you got it in compliance, take ownership, and how would all that work?
Not necessarily,
So you
no.
would spend the money and then turn it back over to the operator. Nobody would get it in compliance because the parish would wind up taking.
I said that that's one option now. So let's say that you had an older subdivision where the owner of the plant skipped town and you couldn't
Or
find.
was sick and couldn't afford it or something.
Yeah, there could be some situations where it makes sense to, you can, through DEQ and other agencies, the parish could take that system into receivership. You could take ownership of it and take over the billing of the customers. If there's nobody that's actively owning and operating the facility, that's something, this ordinance would give you the authority to do that too. And then to cover the cost of the repairs you had to make, well, now you can actually send sewer bills to the people that live in that subdivision. That's another possibility. In fact, in this summary I made for you today, Shane, I've got that list actually right here. And that's what I said, that this ordinance would give the parish the authority to impose fines, fix the problems and back charge the owner, stop issuing building permits for buildings that would connect to that sewer treatment facility. And here's another option. You know, you may have a, one operator that has skipped town on the residents and the plant, and then you may have an operator next door that has a facility, another private sewer operator that has a facility that's running really well, and he's reinvesting money into his plant. And if he has the capacity to take those customers, that's another authority that the parish would have, would be to force connection of that subdivision to the adjacent sewer utility operator, if they were willing and had the capacity and wanted the customers. So that's another authority that this ordinance would give the parish.
I found that page, it was, 3021 AI searches in this 31 pages worth of federal area.
Yeah. You can, it's public information.
But it's every permit in the parish, or is it just the sewer permits?
It's all the wastewater, it's all.
It's just the sewers, I mean, it's 31, it's got their, the address where it's at, and it's got their mailing address.
Cause the one I looked at had all the permits in it. I guess I didn't have it sorted by just sewer.
Agency interest circuit was.
I don't know.
But regardless, we got a list coming from DEQ, so we good on that. Got it covered.
You know, I'm not opposed to making the environment better, but I'm just thinking in my head right now that earlier in the last ordinance meeting, we said this wasn't gonna cost the parish any funding, current taxpayer dollars, but as I'm listening to this,
Shane, I didn't say
Sounds
that's
like it
what you
is.
would do every time. I said that would be an option that the parish would have if you chose to exercise it. And I also talked about taking those franchise fees, inspection fees, some of those funds could be used to do something like that. So it wouldn't take existing revenue from the parish, you know? So you could do it without using existing parish revenue.
well, explain how that's possible.
Okay, we talked about having franchise fees for private for-profit utilities.
And what if they refuse to pay that? How, I mean, and I'm just talking through this, I'm not against, I'm just,
Just
there's
like
a
people
lot of things
refuse
that
to
need
pay
be
the
worked
mosquito
out
tax.
before we
I
can
know
even
what you
start.
mean, I know what
Huh?
you mean.
What
I
if
said
they
just like
refuse to pay? I mean,
people
what-
wouldn't pay the mosquito tax. I'm
What
not.
is the-
What are you gonna do?
Shane, ultimately, if you wanna just be an anarchist and not
I'm
pay-
not, I told you I
Well,
want to
no,
protect the
I mean, I'm just
environment.
telling you, but if somebody refuses to pay, I think there's a provision in here where ultimately the parish can seize somebody's sewer treatment system. You, at some point in time, are gonna have to play ball, or you're gonna be out of the business.
You know,
So if you, well, okay, that's a good answer to that question. What are you gonna do when you seize it? You know, you're gonna collect a franchise fee of, what did you say, $20 a year per house or
You're
something?
gonna collect, whoever operates it.
All
Well,
of-
we have a Livingston Parish Sewer District,
Uh-huh.
and it does have a limited boundary. We grant that, it is a defined boundary that I think y'all are working to make larger, am I correct?
Well, what we're trying to do right now, Gary, is provide sewer to everybody in those district boundaries.
Right, but I mean,
We
but,
could expand the boundary.
I mean, I think you've gotta expand the boundary now, cause you've got some new subdivision, new plant getting ready to be built. Didn't you talk about having to expand the boundary? of the sewer
We may
district
have
already?
to, that's right.
All I'm saying is before we get deep into this, I kinda like the way things are going right now. Not that I like raw sewer being dumped into the environment, but I do like the way that the sewer district is being expanded at the current moment and not forcing individuals in Livingston Parish to, you know,
I mean.
do things against their will.
Okay.
I like that. I mean, you talked about the new facility off of, Buddy Ellis, that's awesome down there, man, that is really, really
Okay,
nice
so-
down
so-
there, you know, so let's
So let me
Let's
ask you a
grow it the
question.
way we're
So-
currently growing it and not rush it and force things.
Okay, but this is not related to that. This is related to the regulation of packaged sewer treatment plants inside our parish. Has nothing to do with the growth of parish-wide sewer. This ordinance here is if subdivision X has got a defective sewer treatment plant, it gives the parish the ability to make sure it gets fixed. Without this ordinance, then we're relying on DEQ, and historically, Eddie's telling you, historically, it's not getting done. Now, you can disagree with that all you want, but when Sewer District Two acquired $3 million worth of customers, $3.5 million worth of customers, 80% of the plants did not meet the discharge standard. Historically, the plants in the parish are not meeting the standard. We have requested copies of every discharge permit related to a sewer treatment plant. We don't want stormwater permits, we don't want underground storage tanks, we want sewer discharge permits on sewer treatment plants within the parish. And then we're gonna look for which ones of those are under a compliance order. And I think you're gonna be absolutely amazed at how many of those plants are not meeting their discharge standard now. Now, we can put this on hold until we get that information if you think we're wasting our time. But ultimately, historically, we know, based on what we've seen in the past, that there is a goodly portion of discharge permits in this parish that are not meeting standards. I know that for a fact because one of the operators in this parish that will go unnamed received a rate increase from the Public Service Commission. And the purpose of that was to help improve his facilities so that he would help meet his standards. He collected the money for a few months, did not improve his standards, and if I'm not mistaken, didn't the Public Service Commission roll his rates back? So, I mean, you can think that everything's going fine right now.
I didn't
and
say it
that
was going fine.
Well, you just said you like the way things are going.
I kinda like the way the sewer district.
Well, this ordinance,
Group is
this
growing
ordinance,
and
this
doing that.
ordinance has nothing to do with the growth of the sewer district. This ordinance is about protecting everybody within this parish, and the sewer district's boundaries is not this parish. The sewer district's boundaries are limited, and they're defined by an area that it covers. But this ordinance would address people in Albany who have a subdivision and a mechanical sewer treatment plant that is not working, but Albany is not covered by the sewer district. So I'm just gonna tell you, if you don't want the people in Albany to have clean water,
Why you gotta single out the
I'm
people?
just-
Where
I'm
you
just-
going with this?
I'm just talking
Let's
about
just talk about the people who live in the parish as a whole.
That's right.
We represent the whole parish.
Well, I understand, but what I'm telling you is you talk about the way the sewer district's growing, and what I'm telling you, the boundary of the sewer district doesn't include Albany, doesn't include Holden. It's a limited area, and
We have a community system in Albany. The city of Albany has their own sewer system.
okay, but are there no subdivisions in Albany that are not tied to the community system?
There may be some that have their own
Okay.
individual private sewer systems.
And this ordinance would regulate them. It would not regulate the city of Albany, but it would regulate those for-profit entities that might be operating within the area. And if they don't have any, then it wouldn't apply to that area at all. But there exists within this parish subdivisions that have mechanical sewer treatment plants that are not meeting their discharge permit. And we can continue to let that happen, and we continue to contaminate our streams, rivers, and lakes, or we can look at trying to address it. Now, Eddie has told, I'm gonna be honest with you, we are 30 minutes in this meeting, and we have not even got through the progress report.
But we're talking about some very important issues that need to be worked out
I understand.
before we even start finishing this.
Okay, so,
Okay, so what
issues do you have? Let's talk about the issues. So, wait a second. You wanted to know what the intent was. The intent, Eddie told you, was to clean up our waterways.
Okay.
That's the intent.
That's good.
Then you wanted to know how we would go about doing that. We would go about doing it by ensuring that the people tested and met their discharge permit. If they didn't do it, how would we make them? Either by fining them, fixing them, or seizing them. He talked about that. What other concerns are there?
Okay, good. So one of my biggest concerns is putting all this regulation out there, okay, and not having the authority to enforce it and actually truly make a difference, such that we are.
Okay, so let
So,
me,
well,
wait a
because
second, why is
you didn't
Saint,
get
wait,
to finish
no,
the
wait a
answer.
second, no, why does Saint Tammany have more authority than Livingston Parish?
I'm not saying.
Why
that-
does, well, yeah, you are, because Saint Tammany wrote an ordinance that allows the parish to regulate this thing, and they're enforcing it. But we can't write an ordinance in Livingston Parish that allows us to enforce it? Ascension has an ordinance that allows them to enforce it. Do we not have the same ability to write an ordinance and enforce it within Livingston Parish? Or are we defective that we can't write an ordinance and enforce something in our parish?
I'm not saying we're defective at all, but what I am saying is that St. Tammany government, their parish generates way more revenue than ours, okay? And that if we introduce regulation and can't enforce it because we don't have the funding to, I see no use in doing it.
If we,
You know?
we talked about, Eddie, which line is that?
I mean, to
Which-
me, we need to
which
focus
line-
more,
Which line was it where we talked about generating the number of customers so that we could calculate what the fee schedule would be and the budget, so that we could generate the necessary fees to be self-funded?
but Gary, you cannot enforce people to pay the fee. So therefore, he's standing up here telling me that he wants the parish to fund this thing.
Okay, wait a
With
second.
what
What,
money?
who's gonna pay, think about it. What do you mean we can't make people pay the fees?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how you gonna make people pay this franchise fee?
Okay, so do we make people buy occupational license? Do we make people pay sales tax?
I'm
do
talking
we-
about,
what-
Gary, I'm talking about already developed subdivisions.
We're talking
where
about,
the sewer
we're
system
talking
is out of
about, we're
compliance. They
talking,
already have all their
we're
permits.
talking about businesses. We're talking about applying a franchise fee to a for-profit regulated utility, is what we're doing,
For,
so-
for a new development?
for any development.
That's what I'm saying, how you gonna collect the fee on an
Be-
already developed subdivision that's already permitted to have lights and all these different things? They already have their occupational license to live inside this home and all that kind of stuff. That's
We're
what I
not, we're
wanna
not
talk about.
charging the people. We're not charging the residents.
I
We're
agree.
charging the operator
Who's
Right.
gonna
a
charge?
franchise
And-
fee. Demco pays parish franchise fee, doesn't it?
Think so.
Energy pays a franchise fee, doesn't it? Cox Cable pays us a franchise fee. The water companies pay us the water companies don't have to pay for it. Cable pays us, does the telephone pay us? Do we get,
Cable
we don't get electric franchise fees?
They pass through the customers typically?
I mean, I know that the cable company does, but there's specific requirements on what you can and can't do with that money.
No, we're not, we're talking about, you talking about the fund for the PEG channel? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about there are other franchise fees that get charged. The parish could easily pass an ordinance to charge a franchise fee to an operator of a sewer treatment system.
An operator?
That's what this is about, a regulated
The
utility.
operator works for the owner of the sewer system.
Well, you've got a couple
See,
of different.
I think we having a confusion about what we're talking about. Okay, for example.
I'm very confused.
Okay,
I'm trying to
let's-
figure out the
Let's see, Ascension Wastewater, MoDay, Utilities Inc., Tessie. I know there are more. I mean, those are four that I
But
can
those
think
would be
of.
the for-profit.
Those are for-profit.
Sewer utilities that
Sewer ut-
would pay a franchise fee.
So basically, if Tessie, for example, operates an oxidation pond in my subdivision, I don't know how many houses we have, 40 houses. You follow me?
Yeah.
Tessie's rates are set by the Public Service Commission.
Mhm.
So we could, in theory, if we pass this ordinance, bill Tessie 40 times 5 every quarter. Okay? The whole purpose of some of the information that Eddie was gathering was to determine how many customers, how many operators, what the revenue would be versus what the budget might be, so he could, as we discuss this ordinance, generate what the rates would be. Because when we put $5 in here and have said from day one,
That's a
that is a
placeholder.
number we're starting with till we figure out what it would cost and what the revenue generated would be. we have been told by Ms. Myers on more than one occasion, we have no money to operate this system. It's gonna have to be self-funded. There's no doubt that if we go into the regulation of sewer treatment systems, they're gonna have to generate their own revenue. We're aware that that's part of the discussion that we're gonna have. Look,
So that's-
are,
So 40 times 5, that would be, what, $800? Is that right?
$800 a quarter per subdivision,
So that'd be-
200, yeah,
That'd be $200 a quarter, $800 a year
per subdivision.
per subdivision.
And I mean,
Can we go in and overtake that sewer system and operate it and regulate it?
wait a
for that
second,
kind of
wait a
money?
second.
Is that how
Depending on the rates related to that thing, that is the rate to us. If you took over the sewer system, you would generate anywhere, what, $50?
$50 a customer per
$50 per
month.
customer monthly is about what an average customer pays. So, look,
Okay, I'm talking through it.
so the sewer district, Eddie, is operating at a break-even point at what? Do y'all know
Well,
what the number is?
they finally have their rates to the point to where they're covering all their O&M, and they're banking a little money for expansions and improvements, and their average rate's around $50 a month. And that's the only source of revenue that they have is user fees.
Okay.
So, look.
Yes,
That's just
sir.
sewer. So
Just
look, I
sewer.
mean, look, we have spent another meeting, we are 40 minutes in this meeting, and we hadn't talked about the ordinance. And we're not gonna get to talk about the ordinance, so we gotta
We've been
give.
talking about the ordinance the whole entire
Well,
meeting, to me,
well, I understand, but
but not the
it's-
specifics of it.
Well, I
because
understand,
haven't had
'cause-
time to do that yet.
I'd like to say something.
Go ahead.
You know, it sounds like still have a lot to talk about. And I think we all wanna get the parish cleaned up as far as the sewer. But you know, if you take the parish as a whole, there's still people that own the old timey septic tanks that are putting sewer in ditches. And then there's people with package plants that don't quite pass every month, but they pass some. And then there's people like the city that probably do some of the best jobs of treating sewer. So what this ordinance pretty much does is take the people who currently are treating sewer and make them do a better job when there's 50 to 70%, this won't even affect, like individual treatment plants and stuff like that. And I guess I said all that to say this, there is so much we need to talk about on this. Instead of bringing it to ordinance committee, which is our job as an ordinance committee, is to create an ordinance. I know Mr. Gerald with the master plan committee has looked really hard, and a major portion of this master plan committee is sewer. Or areas of the parish need to focus on sewer, like the corridor, the I-12 corridor. The money we spent for this plan talks about how important it is for developing this parish to have sewer in those areas. Why don't we just quit beating this horse in the ordinance committee and let this go to the master plan committee? And he has assured me they will pick this up immediately and work through the ins and outs with Eddie and with our DHH department that collects a fee, how they can refine it and move forward. I mean, they are willing to tackle this in that committee and work to improve the sewer in this parish. You know, I think this ordinance committee should be working a lot more on drainage and other ordinances that they're a little bit more pressing than some of the sewer samplings that may not be passing every month. And I do know that the city of Denham Springs expanded our sewer district. We are so much further ahead than what we used to be. We're not where we're gonna be, and we all can look forward and see where we're lacking, but if we look back, we see how far we've gone with improving sewer. I really think we're just gonna keep beating this up in this ordinance committee. I think we need to send this to the master plan committee, let them look at this, work with Eddie, and then decide this. What do we wanna do with this? What direction do we wanna go? Who do we wanna benefit? Who do we wanna target? And before I stop saying, I did have a guest come tonight, Mr. Doug Bozeman, I think has a little bit to throw in on this information. If it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have Mr. Doug come up to the podium,
Sure.
just give
Mr. Gerald, you probably not gonna get to talk
a
tonight.
couple
so come on.
thoughts. And if you don't mind, and he's just in the
We
wastewater
gotta
treatment.
resign in 5, we gotta close out in 5 minutes, so let Mr. Bozeman speak, and then we'll figure out what time we got.
I'm gonna condense this into 2 minutes if I can. I'm Doug Bozeman. I own wastewater treatment systems and operations. We maintain over 500 facilities across the state, and I used to own a utility company, so I'm real familiar with all the things you're talking about. The primary way you're talking about funding this is basically 4 big utility companies that are in Livingston Parish. They should be talking about this. What do you think these people are gonna do when you say, hey, Bill Stiegel, you have 10,000 customers, we're gonna charge you $20 a year. Oh, it might be twice that, we don't know. That's 200 grand. You think he's gonna write a check for 200 grand? And you're only talking to really 4 players here. You're asking the same question to all 4. That's how you're talking about funding this. You probably ought to be talking to them before you go any further on, are you gonna get resistance on this or not? I had parishes, I'm in 60 different parishes across the state. When I owned the utility, I had people try to force me to pay for stuff with my utility company. I had an easy answer for it. As soon as the Public Service Commission approves that I can add it to my rate case, I'll pay it. That's a multi-year process and requires lobbying. Not happening fast. And I guarantee you'll get a real similar answer for them. I'll add anything to my rate you want as soon as I get approved to take it from the customer. Because you're just not gonna arbitrarily soak up my profits into something that y'all wanna do. That's gonna be the same answer you're gonna get from Bill Stiegel and Tessie and all the rest of them. So you might wanna address the funding issue, because everything past that, if you don't have the funding, you can't do any of this. I really like the idea of some of the stuff in this ordinance. I could go through the list, but I'm gonna not take up all the time to do that. Half of this stuff I kinda liked. I mean, I think it could help. One last thing. DEQ and DHH, while we're talking about haven't done that great of a job, I've been monitoring this since 2002 when I got into business. Let me give you a couple of highlights. Keenan Glover over in DHH, been there about 2 years, has got at least 2 licensed installers that aren't licensed to do business anymore in Livingston Parish because he shut them down. They weren't doing a good job. He's actively been pushing NOVs on numerous commercial treatment plants. I pride myself with my 30 employees that I do a damn good job. I've gotten 2 NOVs and I've been in his office twice. The guys that aren't doing a good job are either pushing them out of business or they've been down there on a near monthly basis. This is the guy that does the parish and state. He's the state agency with the parish guys helping him. That's this guy. He's checking all residential re-inspections against the install permit. You go out there and you certify that thing's working properly, he pulls the permit, checks it. Did you check what you were supposed to? He's checking it. DEQ has got 6 times more restrictive on their discharge standards in the last couple of years. They've established an entire list of something called TMDLs, where they've established new requirements on top of the ones that they had, made the owners of the treatment plants pay for all the sampling to establish what the new requirements are gonna be, and then in 2016, made them start meeting those new requirements. These restrictions are so tight already, I don't think the labs are capable of testing it any tighter. BOD, biochemical oxygen man, is the measure of the strength of wastewater. Most plants built in Livingston Parish meet a standard of 30. That's what they're engineered for. Most of them in Livingston Parish right now, thanks to DEQ, have a BOD standard of 5. That's 6 times cleaner water. And they're trying to do it with a plant that wasn't engineered to make it. They got a bunch of money to spend to try to fix that, in addition to all the additional DEQ requirements that got levied on them. Grace Creek and Amite River, you go check the samples, significantly better in the last 5 years because of the TMDLs that DEQ's been enforcing. All of this information from DEQ is available online, a long list of stuff. Yeah, it takes a computer degree to try to figure it out. Your question that you were looking for, how many discharges are in Livingston Parish, we looked it up while we were sitting here and sent it to John. And Eddie, if I had your phone number in my phone, I'd have sent it to you. You just got to download it off the website, sort it with an Excel spreadsheet, you can get anything you want. And I happen to have a girl that knows just how to do that. So, any quick questions for me, and I'll try to let your other man get up here and talk.
Just wanna say we need people like you to show up and help us.
Thanks for coming, Doug.
And help us,
I mean,
write good,
I
you
think
know,
there's a lot
legislation.
that we need to talk about on
it
this.
is.
Shane, you've got the right idea. What's the purpose? It's easy to say, I want cleaner water. Everybody wants cleaner water. How does the parish do something more than what's already being done?
Right.
What's being done is really quite a bit. Now, I'm not gonna say it happens fast. That happens pretty slow, but I can name 2 companies that are utility companies that aren't in the state of Louisiana anymore because DEQ ran them out.
Because they ran them out.
And one of them was in Livingston Parish.
I think this should be studied more, and so, I don't know if time's gonna permit, but I'd like to get a motion in before we close, that we stop beating this horse in the ordinance committee, refer it to the master plan committee, let them go to work on this, and report back to the parish council. Then the parish council can decide, appoint Mr. Idell to continue to work on the ordinance that we want working on. And because the council hadn't even decided whether we want to do this or not. So I think, I'd like to make a motion, we send this to the master plan committee, let them review it, and bring a recommendation to the parish council within 2 months. An update at the next parish council meeting, after they have their meeting. And then at that point, we can pick it up at the parish council and decide whether we want to start building, drafting an ordinance or not. Can I get a second in that one?
I would like to say that as long as it doesn't override the current priorities of the master planning committee, because to me, the number one priority to me that I would like to see out of that committee is that master drainage plan, you know, so we can have us a plan that needs to be implemented, and then we can go generate some dedicated funding and dedicated resources to enact that plan, you know, and so I'm okay with that. I'll second that based on the condition that that committee understands. To me, the number one priority is to develop that master drainage plan so that we can go dedicate those funding and get that.
Come on up real quick, Gerald.
I like the fact that we're having a debate on sewer. To clean up this parish, if you go back to the master plan, they talked about 137 to 140,000 people, and you got 6 public sewer systems in the parish, but that only handles less than 30% of all the sewer in this parish. And of course, you got mobile home parks, apartments, and the subdivisions you're talking about, but the rest of them are individual treatment plants. So we really need to clean up this parish on sewer. Now, how you get there is what we're talking about, but if you want to send it to the master plan, Mr. Gary and I talked about that, and I've invited him to come, and let's talk about doing grants and I don't know, one of the things that the parish done years ago was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers done a complete study of this parish on sewer. And the Denham Springs Sewer District expanded south and took up a lucrative area, so I don't know, maybe you might want to revive that. But let me ask you a question. The intent of this ordinance is only subdivisions that have package treatment plants that is regulated by the Public Service Commission. Am I correct?
Actually, I think, Eddie, we're addressing commercial sewer treatment plants and.
But I didn't read that in this ordinance.
I didn't read that.
If you want it,
It's got a lot of
I
practical
think
stuff in it.
if you're gonna do this ordinance, I think you should include that.
Yeah, I
All
think-
commercial,
I
stores
think
and
commercial.
restaurants and et cetera, yeah.
I think the only thing exempt from this ordinance is like, if you have a house or you got a MODAD or a septic tank or whatever, you're exempt. We're not addressing that at this point.
That's not part of this
That's
ordinance.
not what we're talking about. We're talking about commercial
Right,
sewer treatment plants, whether they be
right.
package units that are regulated, that
Okay.
are being fed by subdivisions, or whether they're package units that are being fed either by some other commercial enterprise.
Okay.
And so that's what we're looking at addressing, because to try to get to the individual sewer treatment
Well,
plant.
the thing that I was concerned with at the last meeting is that it was mobile home parks and apartments and not commercial and so forth, and
Well,
you've addressed that.
Yeah, I think
that's
we,
private, that's
we're
not.
gonna address all
But
that. I
anyway.
think the funding source, though, we talked about where you had the concern was.
Well, I do want to thank y'all for having a debate about sewer.
So Gerald, my question is the master plan's looking at you know, growth throughout the parish and how to grow the sewer system. Am I correct? And
Well,
this ordinance
it's
is addressing-
multifaceted. We're talking about the economic corridor, bringing infrastructure in the
So-
corridor, which
so-
is roads
so-
and sewer.
So,
You know, telephones and water are everywhere, okay?
so this ordinance that we're talking about is addressing how to clean up the discharge from existing package units.
I
Is
understand.
that something you wanna address in the ordinance, in the master plan?
I don't know, that's up to the whole committee, there's 9 people on the committee,
So-
we can talk about it and see, I don't know, it's up to them.
Okay, so we got a motion by Mr. Wascom, we got a second by Mr. Harris to send this ordinance to the master plan to have it evaluated at the master plan. Well, actually, Bubba raised his hand earlier to do it before Shane made the motion. So let's call for the roll, see if, let's talk about sending this to the master plan committee, and see if the committee wants to look at getting into the regulations of sewer at that
Or
point in time.
the growth of sewer. And-
Well, wait a second,
but-
this ordinance isn't about growth, this ordinance is about regulation and
Okay.
discharge. So if you wanna send this ordinance about regulation and discharge to the master plan, which is what your ordinance is, then we're willing to do that,
Okay, well, let me be specific on my motion.
okay?
Okay, my motion is to stop discussing this ordinance in this ordinance committee, of which we've had 3 times and gotten nowhere on it. Let's send it to the master plan committee so they can evaluate the intent of the ordinance, and then at that point, make a recommendation whether we should create an ordinance, and if so, what it should be.
Y'all, you got Mr. Wascom's, so Bubba, you wanna continue to second Mr. Wascom's motion?
We should give them the opportunity, if they wanna do it, we'll let them.
There's
do
a
it.
lot to
Okay.
talk
If they
about.
don't,
So, you wanna call the roll on that particular
no,
motion?
but if they don't wanna do it, then it's gonna come back to us, so.
Mr. Mack,
Yeah.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Wascom,
Yes.
Mr. Talbot?
No, so the ordinance carries. Any other comment from the public? None, motion for adjournment? Got a bubble, Mr. Harris, second. Any objections? None.